name is Maria Vinogradova. I'm a visiting scholar here at the Jordan Center, and I am very excited to introduce our speaker tonight, Natalija Arlauskaite from the University of Vilnius, from the Institute of International Relations and Political Science, a scholar with a very diverse range of interests, who in particular now, in the last few years especially, has been researching cinema a lot, and she's in Lithuania. She's the editor-in-chief of the book series Writings on Film by the publishing house Genties, and she has translated works by Sergei Eisenstein into Lithuanian. And her current book project, which this research is a part of, is on Eastern European art and film projects dealing with World War II and socialist era image archive. But, prior to this, she has also worked more broadly in visual theory on topics such as historical imagination and reflection on war atrocities in film and arts. And she wrote a book on Vladimir Klevnikov, analysis of hermetic text structure and semantic space in works by Klevnikov in 2005, and as well as key concepts of feminist film theory in 2010, and naive and foreign canons, film adaptations between narrative theory and cultural studies, more recently in 2014. So tonight's talk will be dedicated to the use of still photography in Lithuanian documentaries on the Soviet past. Now, Natalija has been traveling a lot recently, and the weather has not been exactly friendly, so she caught a cold, and I ask you to listen very attentively, because speaking is not easy today. Another announcement I wanted to make is that in this lecture we are making an experiment where the more regular audience, the community of the Jordan Center, is joined by my undergraduate class from Pratt Institute, which I'm teaching this semester. Our course is called Contemporary International Cinema, and this covers the documentary film module within it. So I also encourage students to take part in the Q&A to the lecture. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I would like to thank Maria for an invitation and for taking all the trouble arranging this event. And I would like to apologize immediately for my voice. It can disappoint you and betray me at any moment. So in this case, we have a plan B. If I won't be able to produce any sounds, then we will turn to the screening mode, and we will be watching some good films. But I will try. So you see the title of my talk, and I have a couple of preliminary remarks. In the topic of still photography in documentary is, on the one hand, is much discussed, and on the other hand, it is very little done on how the photography, especially private photography, family photography from Soviet and socialist time, is reflected on and discussed in other media. So I'm interested in documentary films on the Soviet and socialist past, which heavily reflects on different kinds of photography. Next month, in the end of March, the cluster edited by Sergei Ushakin, probably many of you know him, will appear in the magazine journal Новое литературное обозрение in Jurate Review. And some material which I will present here today is included in this article. So So you may read it if you want in once. And the other remark is that this project is part of a bigger one, which is supported by Lithuanian Research Council, and I'm supposed to complete my book on the same topic by the beginning of the next year. So either in Russian or in Lithuanian, it will be available. And today we will try to see what's going on in this part of my life. I would like to begin with the work of Indrė Petita. As you can see, it's just still image and no moving images around. Indrė Petita is London-based Lithuanian artist. She is mostly working with image archives from the Soviet time. And this series of her, which is called the Pedestal, is that it consists of works of different size, different shape, and different colors, which in each case it reflects on how contemporary traces of the Soviet past, namely monuments, are connected with some documents from the Soviet time. In each of these pieces, she combines a contemporary image of the Soviet monument moved to a quite remote place near Druskininkai resort. There is kind of Soviet Disneyland where Soviet monuments are collected and placed in a park-like zone. So she combines pictures made by her in this place, and then she edits these kind of pictures with ones which she finds in archives, in private archives or state archives in different places. And these pictures, all the pictures, they present usually the former place to which these monuments belong. And exactly this situation you can see in this example. The color photography presents contemporary view, and black and white presents the older one. What I'm interested in how these images come together, how they are joined, how they are connected. And by this I'm interested in what the subject position for the one who reflects on the past is available. It is quite significant that in her first attempts in this series, she usually aligned older and newer pictures by the edges. And usually they presented whole picture which is not somehow distorted. And later on she started experimenting with different parts, shapes, and sizes of upper and lowest parts, and that's how she offers this debate on what is the place for a subject who creates stories about the past, who narrates the past. For those of you who do not know what's exactly this place in the forest park, I will show you a little clip from the film which is called Aldona, a film made by Emilia Škurnulytė, young Lithuanian artist. And in this film she's filming her aunt, who is nearly blind. She lives near this place, Bruto Parks it's called. And from time to time she goes for a walk to this park, and that's how she sees this remains. You see beautiful view of a season. and not filter spark three.
Switch between screens.
Yeah.
Usually, I think outside. Just large. But now we have that.
Slide.
Trying to project this onto maybe. And try to track it.
Thank you.
So if you want to navigate, just you have to look at this screen instead. Yeah, there we go. And then just look at, use this screen as...
Yeah, so drag it from left to right.
What are you trying to do? Are you trying
I'm
to
trying
enlarge?
to make full screen.
F5. Try F5.
I tried it, but it didn't work. And it was okay before. You checked it.
Oh, I just lost it, sorry.
You did?
From current slide.
From current slide, yeah, try that.
Look there and
So from this clip, you can see that what interests me is the field of vision available. So what kind of field of vision is available to a nearly blind person who is trying to reach some monuments of the past, and in the same way, what field of vision is available to us when we when we meet some pictures, some photographic documents from the past, and how we try to connect them together, or how we can edit them into bigger narratives and into bigger stories. I will divide my talk in 3 parts, 2 introductory and 1 the real one. I don't know how we will manage to reach this point. First I will talk about photography archive that come from repressive institutions of the Soviet time, and how these photographs are remediated in different kinds of art. Then I will talk about mass media photography and how it was reinterpreted in different branches of art. And finally, I will arrive at the family photography and how it is remediated in contemporary documentary film of the Soviet. I will start with a very significant Lithuanian artist, Kęstutis Grigaliūnas. Now for nearly 10 years he's creating his project, which at first was called Diaries of Death, and now it's called Image Archive. In this first part, Diaries of Death, he created installations, exhibitions, books, different kinds of performances, in which he worked with the images that are reproduced from files from the archives that formerly belonged to different repressive institutions, NKVD, KGB, MGB, and the different other places and institutions. So what he basically does, on a daily basis, he goes to the different archives and he rephotographs all visual material that he finds in certain files. Usually he chooses some period or some story, for example, people which were killed in certain place at certain time, or files of people who were coming back from the forced labor in Germany, and they usually called filtration files, and what kind of material we can find there, and so on. In one of his installations, which is called 1941, you can see 1941 images which belong to the same year, 1941, and these images are from the files of people who were repressed, deported, and in different other ways persecuted. What is done in this exhibition, he rephotographs an image from the file, then he enlarges this image, and then he changes the media. What he does, he prints it in a silk print. So former photographed, then rephotographed, and then turned into a new media of silk print, changing material conditions of viewing and of meeting this kind of images. And I want to remind you that I am interested in the field of vision, in how the subject is positioned towards certain images which belong to the archive of the past. When you enter the exhibition space, you have rows of images above your head. They were placed a little higher than average height of a person, and they are placed at approximately palm width among them, but not the same distance. So every time when you enter, when you try to see what is pictured on each and every picture, you have to adjust yourself to the viewing. As each time you have a little bit different angle, you have a little bit different position, so you bodily, corporally have to choose what you're doing. I am choosing a very rational attitude towards you're seeing, and for example, we understand the rule how this exhibition is done, and you read just the rule and you leave the space, or you go row by row, image by image, and then you have you create for yourself almost vertigo experience, because each time you have to somehow a little bit turn and shift your work. When he wrote together with his partner and also artist Močiute introduction for this exhibition, he emphasized that he considers this installation as part of broken film. For him, it was very important that what we are meeting there, we are meeting not discrete units, but formally related units, formally forming some stories which are forgotten, broken, and unavailable by now. So in this case, I'm interested in this bodily accommodation to the images, to changing field of vision, and para-cinematic ways of thinking about how these images are connected together. In his next work, still belonging to the same project, in his next work, still belonging to the same project, it's called About Love. He rephotographed not what is usually considered as image, for example, a picture of a person or some places, buildings, streets, and so on. He began photographing just plain bureaucracy visuality. And he created 130 files out of this visual material, again, rephotographs from the files from the same institutions. And what he was interested in, he was interested in the flow, in the visual flow. What Michel de Certeau called economy of writing, and how this visual flow of writing produces in the end criminal bodies, produces new identities, and produces new new subjects. At what point the viewing subject is introduced. And in some cases you can clearly see the point where this viewing subject or reflecting subject is introduced. For example, in this part, the fingerprint is rephotographed together with artist's finger. So artist's finger is included as a viewing subject or as touching subject, or haptic subject, into the visual flow reproduced in this way. And it is clear that all this program of artistic work is related to the idea that if you want to do something with history through the images, you have to destroy or to change the order of materiality of these images. Exactly what Vilnius is doing in all his works. So otherwise, history is unavailable. You are just meeting some recognized faces and places, but you do not perform the reflective action. And again, it is known to us not only from that well-known article of Giedre Beinoriute, but from Jurate Vilma as well, when he says that the only way to deal with pictures in regard to historical knowledge is constantly change the order of these pictures. And practically what he said that the reflective operation which you can perform is called montage. You are montaging all the time different kinds of pictures, and by this you develop your historical thinking, and you perform this act of relation to history. I wouldn't like to abuse and overuse the word memory. I do not think that it works every time. That, for example, you could phrase it the same. If you would like to perform historical memory, then you have to perform montage. But I'm not sure that in every case it can be called memory, so I will drop it and stick to different vocabulary. Ending this phase of his big project, which is continuous up to now, Vilnius made like a finale exhibition. He rolled these pictures, the silk prints from the exhibition 1941 into scrolls, papyrus-like scrolls. And then he placed them as drapes on the walls, and that's how he created this new grandiose but still minimalist new archive, which now requires some new special attention, but for now it's closed. And then he turned these pictures of this closing session into the works of art themselves. So now he's building on his exhibitions again and again. And what happens in this next phase of his work, he's experimenting with what we could call anonymity of the images. Just try to imagine that he rephotographed thousands and thousands images from files. And at a certain point, you lose connection between these images. At a certain point, images become completely anonymous. They do not tell you anything, especially if you do not know immediate context of them, of how they were collected, placed, appeared, and so on. And 2 years ago, he made an exhibition which was called How Optimism of the 19th Century Turned into Barbarity of the 20th Century. In this exhibition consists of different images found in files, but now he is offering visitors to arrange them. And he just created piles of images on what you call it, thick paper. And he invited visitors to arrange the pictures in the order, whatever you wish. And what appeared and what was the big surprise, that the idea was a failure. Nobody wanted to curate, nobody wanted to arrange pictures. The only thing which some people tried was introducing very broad categories in which someone could arrange pictures. For example, all cute babies on the same shelf, or all beautiful ladies in hats photographed in studios, professional studios, on the same shelf. all people in uniforms, first Lithuanian uniform, then German uniform, then a little bit of Soviet uniform, of partisan uniform. And so all these uniforms, they appeared on the same shot. And it seems that how we could explain this kind of refusal. Probably one of the reasons is that the weight of all the story around these pictures is too heavy. So you know that something morbid happened to these people, something terrible, or at least heavy. And it is very difficult to drop the narrative frame and to create your own stories. Because in a way you can feel that you are entering in a rude way or in not just way the story which surrounds these pictures that you are arranging. And the other reason could be that these narrative frames, they are too rigid. So we learned during last 25 years how to interpret, how to tell this period, how to narrate it. And all the alternative stories which come out of these pictures, which appear in different order, different in different order. So then you may feel that something not initially viewed happens to this picture. That stories somehow violate what was done before. And that's interesting because it brings us back to the initial question: what subject positions are available to us when we are dealing with photographic documents from the past? If the past is narrated into too strictly stories or too strictly ways, then the range, the amplitude of your possibilities is very, very much narrowed, and so you cannot act as you would probably in a different context. Just now, again, just to give you an example, what was done with this kind of imagery in the film. This is a trailer of the film by not Lithuanian but Portuguese filmmaker. She's Susana de Saužavies. And this film is called 48. 48 means 48 years of Salazar dictatorship in Portugal. And what she's doing, she's working with anthropomorphic photographs from the files, and only with them in this film. So if you think that you saw slow films before, probably in this case you will reconsider your experience.
Ficou 18 anos na prisão. Eles queriam muito, gostavam muito de ver a cara de sofrimento dos presos. Tortura. E eu, ou arranjava uma expressão assim desprezível para eles, ou então fazia assim, mesmo que espancado e barbaramente torturado, sempre bom castigo. Com choques elétricos, com gases asfixiantes, não eram mortais. Eram suficientes para atormentar, não é?
Here, this short clip. You probably noticed that two photographs, they were morphed together, and thus creating the effect of duration, which is usually which usually belongs to the realm of moving images, and that's how still photography is remediated and introduced into different media. My next part and block of cluster of images is mass media photography. It seems more obvious than pictures from repressive institutions, but still it is interesting how they can be a source of reflection on the history. Some of examples come, for example, from 1990s, as this works by Aleksas Andriuškevičius, and they belong to this late Eastern European postmodernism, when some images from mass media were reproduced and then turned into stamps, and thus these images are reflected as worn off, as decaying, as devalued, and so on. Beautiful, arranged in different compositions, but still a way to think how mass media works and how the endless reproduction of images can be turned into a work of art in different media. But I'm much more interested in later works. For example, Aistė Kirvelytė, and she is an artist from a different generation. She works with imagery from Soviet newspapers, and actually not only Soviet newspapers, current ones as well, as a source for her painting. Her works usually are made on oil silk, Tsarata. And they are usually of a huge format, big size. For example, these works are not so big, but in each of them she reproduces some image from the newspaper, then enlarges the same image, then changes media from photography to painting, and sometimes oil painting, and then she cuts this new works of art, usually in 4 parts, and that's how she creates new patchworks and new puzzles of this mass media imagery. The main work to which I would like to draw your attention is called Life Story of a Woman. It is a gigantic series of semi-comics, semi-stills from unknown or never existed film. She creates a fictional biography of a woman, and this fictional biography starts in early Soviet times, which for Lithuania is post-World War II. And then this biography continues through independence movement, and then ends with lifestyle journals of magazines of contemporary of our time. So in each of these works, and they're really huge, 2 works put together like this one, they would cover all these walls. They are massive, they are gigantic, monumental works. Monumental works made of just ordinary newspaper photographs. Media changed, materiality changed, and then conditions for creating new stories and new attitudes or new interpretations somehow established. And she ends this this work with, let's say, contemporary images from the lifestyle magazines. And what is interesting, she in the exhibition space, in one huge room she placed this monumental work. In another room she placed a different piece of art, and it's called Heroes, the same technique, but this time she directly redraws images from the films, from classical Hollywood films, and that's how she equals what's going on in Soviet newspapers during all the Soviet time in this imaginary biography of a woman, and then what's going on the screen in classical Hollywood film, and the fictionality becomes almost of the same level and degree, and the thinking is very similar. The life story of a woman reminds us of a comic book, but still when it's in the close affinity to some, again, para-cinematic, quasi-cinematic, referring to some cinematic work, then this cinematic undercurrent appears again. So these discrete images, they appear as if they would be connected by some imaginary film. Again, just to show what, not here, sorry, what can be done with this kind of material directly in
Switch to
I think I learned how to do that. I would like to show you a small clip from the video work of Estonian artist. Her name is Marge Monko, and the work is titled Nora's Sisters. And in this, she combines pictures from the factory newspaper with some lines from Alfred Jelinek, not novel, but something like novel. I don't know how to write it properly.
If you trace going here, and then there must be. No, just move the. Oh. Very strange.
Funny.
Sa näed, on siin toimunud suured edusammud. Ma mõtlen tehasel väikest raamatukogu, millega sisse seada tohime.
Siiani pidid te tükkis oma raamatuga valmistatud vaate akna all seisma, et lugeda näha. Varsti aga olete te tõepoolest tänaval, te oodake ainult ära.
Niisuguseid asju on parem mitte tähele panna, Noora.
Haridus on ilumeel ja see tuleb omandada.
Ilu on juba olemas, taevale tänu.
Haridus on kultuurimeel ja see nagu iseloomgi tuleb omandada.
Eelduseks igatahes on vaesuse kõrvaldamine ja aeg järele mõtlemiseks. Varsti on teil palju vaesust ja hästi palju aega mõtlemiseks. Siis aga on juba liiga hilja.
Sa ei pea teda kuulama, Noora. Naised, keda ei armastata, muutuvad teinekord talumatuks.
So, I needed this example just to show how the mass media imagery works together with sound, because now we are switching to documentaries, and I will need this topic, sound and voice in documentaries. So it is quite clear that in this kind of works, sound and voice is used like a counter narrative in regard to the visual material. And this is exactly what usually happens when family photographs are interpreted in film. And it is interesting that it is generally considered that in contemporary art or films pretending to belong to experimental film area. The voice and sound are introduced in this counter-narrative way. In the examples that I will show you, the general poetics of films can be experimental in a way, but the narrative which is created and sound introduced and voices introduced from time to time work not in this counter direction, but very much supporting this main narrative. So now I'm turning to my main three examples that you could read from the announcement. And before I will explain what I want to do with them, I need one more reference. I need the reference to the big literature on family albums and family photography. These three names which appear on the screen, they are united by this approach to family albums, which they call oral photographic method of research. In this naming, they usually have in mind that a photograph, family photograph, without the story told, are usually dead. They are not. They do not participate in the family narrative. They do not actually circulate. So what they want to emphasize that family photographs and family albums are usually work in this oral visual combination. And it's especially important for, as we can see, documentary film, because it's a very rare case when the photographic image is not supported or altered by certain sound or voice strategy. And now the first one is Grandpa and Grandma. It is made by female film director Giedre Beinoriute in 2007. It is mainly photo film, but from time to time she uses documentary footage and animation. She explains herself that she needed these animated parts when she lacked certain parts of the story, and the story is of her family, how her family was deported in 1948 to Siberia and how they returned. All the story is told in this semi-fictional children's voice, and the general mode of the story is the fairy tale. Some miracles happen, some usual formula applied. So this is the story which is reproduced from generation to generation, as Giedre Beinoriute is granddaughter of the people who were deported in the late 40s. So and this story is narrated in usually gendered way, and women in the family, the supporters and reproducers, biological and narrative of the family. And now I will show you a clip from this film. And again we have to
Switch to email.
no, to bring it.
Can you make it full screen?
And this will be the part when family learns that they cannot go back to Lithuania already after Stalin has died. So Stalin dies, they apply for the return, and they are denied.
Odinskas, antroji tremties vieta. Vėl viskas iš naujo. Į Odinską Maskva atsiuntė žinią, kad sugrįžti namo dar negalima. Mama toliau lankė mokyklą. Klasėje ant sienos kabo portretas. Tai Molotovas, buvęs TSRS užsienio reikalų ministras.
Šių kadrų Lietuva dar nematė, bet žino jų esmę. Molotovas, Ribbentropas paktas, slaptieji jo protokolai nulėmė lietuvių tautos likimą.
Mama, kaip ir kitus lietuvius, Sibirę vadino fašistais ir liaudės priešais. Odinske gyvenimas atrodo linksmesnis. Senelis išėjo į pensiją ir nebekirto medžių, o teta nebegenėjo šakų, nes susižeidė koją. Jis skaičiavo nukirstus medžius, o per šventes medį šviesojus. Aštuntais tremties metais į Sibirą iš Lietuvos aplankyti saviškių atvažiavo kitas mano dėdė, Jonas. Stotyje jį pasitiko senelis. Labas, gal Joniukas būsi? Sako senelis savo sūnų, mano dėdį. Taip, Jonas. O aš tavo tėtė. Grįžęs į Lietuvą, dėdė Jonas parašė dar vieną malonės prašymą. Labai prašau peržiūrėti mano pareiškimą ir leisti tėvams grįžti pas mus. Galiu jūs užtikrinti, kad per duotą laiką mano tėvai persiauklėjo ir tikrai gali grįžti, gyventi su mumis ir kartu su visais dirbti liaudies labui. Metų naktį nutiko keistas dalykas. Tai Arendo Rolando kometa. Senelis sakydavo, kad žvaigždė su uodega pranašauja karą. Tačiau šita žvaigždė turėjo dvi uodegas. Vieną kaip visų ir vieną smailų iš priekio. Gal todėl ji išpranašavo kai ką kitą?
I wanted to show you different techniques which are used in this film, but I'm mostly interested in the initial part. When the story of Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact is told. the film is organized mainly in strict chronological order. There are very few detours from this work. And this part, when the story of Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact told, it was already told in the beginning. So how the family was deported, how the regime changed. So already once it was told in the beginning, and now it was told. It is told for the second time. And what is important, how the politics of voice and sound works, is when Giedre Beinoriute in her Q&A, the film director, was asked how she decided to use the portrait of Molotov on the wall in this picture from the classmates of her mother. She said that at the beginning she didn't know who he was. And the curiosity, who is this person, brought her to this strange additional line telling the story of how everything happened. And then this part becomes a tight intertextual knot, as she uses at the same time references very much to the time very much before the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and after. As in the soundtrack, she uses the initial notes of well-known Russian song from Circus, yes, the beginning, the very beginning of the song, which was filmed in 1936, and then she uses the chronicle, the footage from the late 80s, when the story of this pact is explained to Lithuanian audience. So she edits together very different footage and very different material, and very different in temporal sense. And that's how she creates very hybrid part in her film, which is directly related to the fate of all the family. And this, the narration of this starting point is important and interesting in all the films based on family photograph, and telling the story of what happened to the families in that first independent Lithuania and then Soviet Lithuania. And now I will show you my next example. It is from the film of Deimantas Narkevicius. The film is called Disappearance of a Tribe. It is pure photo film, for which he recorded, as he claims, he recorded sound in the places where photographs were made. So he traveled to the parts where his family used to live, and he recorded sound there, but then he admitted that some sound is used from sound libraries, and you will see how it's used. It's used. Everything is ruined.
Do you see the
No, that's the problem.
Oh, maybe we should move it to.
Yeah, yeah. It was right here. Yeah, no. We shouldn't do it together.
And then we go okay. Over to the beginning.
Yeah. The whole film is based on the photography archive of Narkevicius' father. So it's the story. I will jump to the end. In a way, that's at the end of the film. In a way, this film is a clear-cut story of life and death. So the coming of age, education, job, family, and then death. And the story and how it's narrated, the sound is extremely important. It is clear that death is the moment when the sound disappears. But the moment of the change of the fate, and exactly as in the case with Giedre Beinoriute and her this multi-medial and multi-temporal intertextual north, is created in a very hybrid form. If you remember, in the very beginning, you saw the monument of Stalin. At that time, the sound, which was the sound of countryside, very much quiet and pastoral sound, it very abruptly changes, and you hear how soldiers are marching, and you hear urban sounds. The important point in this story is that the picture of the monument was made in one place, but then presented as built and erected in the other. Last summer, we talked with Narkevicius, and it appeared that for nearly 10 years he didn't know that this monument is not from Vilnius as he thought, not from the Lithuanian capital, but from Georgia, from Gyveno. And it means that his father used to travel at his summer vacation to Georgia. He made some pictures of mountains, he made some pictures of beautiful nature, and on the way he made a picture of Stalin's monument at his birthplace in Gyveno. But when Narkevicius was editing this film, he created completely different motivation for this monument through the sound, through the place where this monument appears and the sound that is edited together with this monument. Monument appears not as a postcard from summer vacation. Monuments appears as a morbid, cruel change in the course of life. And that's how this anachronic, if it's possible, acoustic image is constructed as a motivation for whole life story. And it's important because Narkevicius' father actually suffered from psychiatry when it was used as a punishment. He was expelled from his job, and then he was forcefully treated for an existing illness. So all the story of his father is tied to the story of nations, tied to the story of change in the landscape, how it changes through the soundscape, but it is based on a completely anachronic order of family album. And my last example, and we're almost out of time, is film how to do it. Just a moment.
Trick is moving from left to the right.
From left to the right?
Yeah, so do you see?
Yeah. Okay. And the last example is very recent film of made by sisters, Jurate Vilma Samulionyte. And this film is called, actually German title would be much better, Guten Tag. But in English distribution it's called What We Leave Behind. Grandma Guten Tag. And this is the story of Lithuanian Germans from the part of Lithuania near Baltic Sea, from East Prussia. When Soviet army in 1944 approached Lithuania, Lithuanian Germans had to fly from Lithuania. And in the mystery in this family story that the grandmother returned for some unknown reason, and sister decided to uncover this story, remembering that she ended her life by committing suicide. So she had two mysteries in her life. why she committed suicide and why she returned in 1944 when she could remain in Germany. And in this film, they use family archive extensively, but they add to this archive some material from German and Lithuanian state archives, so they are combining this
Nebėra, o procesas tai tikrai sudėtingas. Čia panašu į Lietuvą.
Nu jo. O gal?
Gerai. Vokiečiai, sakykime, gyveno, tokią liniją nubrėšime. Štai čia Klaipėdos kraštas, Tauragė ir Suvalkija. Palit sieną, dar čia kažkur šiaurė. 40 metais Lietuva okupuojama Sovietų Sąjungos ir Baltijos visos šalis. Nacijai siekia, kad visi vokiečiai gyvenantis už Vokietijos ribų būtų, sakykime taip, atgabenti į Vokietiją, kad gyventų tam didžiajame reiche. Čia, sakykime, tos užkulisinės politikos nedalimi tarp Sovietų Sąjungos ir Vokietijos buvo, kad kai čia tos Lenkijos ir Lietuvos nebeliks, paskui mes pasimainysim gyventojais. Jūs pasimkit savo vokiečius į čia, o mes susigražinsim rusus, baltarusus pasimsim ir lietuvius iš Suvalkų krašto čia pasimsim atgal. Ir čia 41 metų sausio mėnesį buvo pasirašyta tokia sutartis, kur vienas iš punktų skelbė, kad mes mainomės gyventojais.
They're traveling to Germany to their relatives.
Der Bruder hatte noch Pferde und Wagen. Alle 3 Familien auf einen Wagen. Und das 8 Wochen.
2 Monate.
Ja. Manchmal im Stall irgendwo geschlafen. Zeug, 8 Wochen nicht ausgezogen.
Atsimenat jūs, pavyzdžiui, erinnern Sie, welche Leute, wie diese Familie war? Erinnern Sie das?
Weiß ich nicht. Ja, das ist zu lange her, nicht? Das ist es.
Können wir das in Litauen nehmen und dann zurückschicken? Oder?
Oder überhaupt.
Oder hier?
Denn ich bin alt. Ich kenne ja meine da Verwandten. Behalten. Ja.
Stop.
So.
Okay.
Auch alt. Männchen. Mond. Jetzt. Großer Mond. Oh, Winter, Winter. Guck.
Now I'm a little bit jamming everything together, but I will say what is really the most important here. What the assist is doing in this film, they are collecting explanations for what happened to their grandmother. And they are testing all possible myths of origin. What happened to nation, what happened to family, how it began, what happened next, and so on. And in the end, they actually drop the myth of origin altogether. They decide not to go through photographs. They decide not to go through different stories, melodramatic, gothic, national, sacrificial, and heroic, and so on. They discover that in their family they have a series of suicides. And they decide that what they have to stick, they have to stick to each other. And they decide that the story of their grandmother is important just to the extent how they can create relations with each other. And this is a very interesting move because the documentary is very conventional, mostly conventional. But it goes much farther in this reconsideration of different myths of origin, combining nation and family, than formally experimental films. And that's probably the main result, the main thing that I would like to share with you. So I started with the question, what field of vision is available to us when we are dealing with family photographic archives, and not only family photographic archives, institutional, mass media affairs. And what subject positions are available to creators, to filmmakers, to artists when they are dealing with these archives. And what seems to be the main challenge is navigating the national and family mythology. And that's how, in exactly on the crossroad between these two narratives, that's where we meet all these techniques of working with materiality of photographic imagery. And then in some ways in modest and, let's say, conservative film, we can sometimes, surprisingly, we can find much more departing from this stable, conventional mythology ways to generate the story of biography and autobiography. Thank you.
Also the range of references and films to watch in full. We might see them in the class next week. Will you take some questions?
Yes, we have 10 minutes.
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes, more like 9, so I'll open the floor right now.
The majority of the works that you selected either were composed of black and white photographs or were black and white photographs with color elements imposed upon them. Do you have formal interest in that style of photography, or do you know what motivates your choice?
I guess the explanation is quite simple, and just this kind of photography was prevalent at that time. Cheap, easily produced. So that's the type of photography that families and institutions produced and kept. In this last film, they use color photography, but it's from late Soviet years, 70s, 80s, when color photography becomes cheap and available. So the reasons are general, not some specific aesthetically.
But also, what about the Yashica camera that one of the filmmakers is holding? So they were apparently making some of those pictures as well.
The initial project of this last film was film for one of sisters and photography project for another one. But then they combined their forces and created film together. And when film premiered, one of them, which was holding, that one was holding the camera, she created an exhibition, archival exhibition, together with pictures made during this film.
So that continues beyond the film itself.
Yes, very much.
Okay. Other questions?
My question is about what you mentioned a few times. You said that you're interested in what kind of subject positions these works create. So, like, I just want to elaborate a bit about how you define subject position. I know that's kind of like the term sometimes used in the literature studies. So it's like how text makes the space for the kind of positioning the subject, not necessarily identifying with it, but like positioning the subject. Like here you showed that works that deal with very different mediums and kind of reworking the original materiality of one medium into another, and so on and so forth. So, like, how do you think about subject position this kind of diverse list of works?
Thank you for the question. I think that it's very close to the point of reflection, how it is constructed. So in a very simple way, we can explain this, the idea of subject as the focal point where all the strategies, narrative strategies of the film come together. So, and for example, Narkevicius, very strangely, he is producing very classical national narrative, how nation is born out of death of one family member. We do not, this decoration of ornamental thing which appears in the end, this brings this endless family, endless signs of nation, just at the moment when the Soviet time is just ended, because he dies in 1989. And then the new era begins. So strangely, he is experimental artist creating, in this case, very much conventional national. That's how the subject can be defined, to my opinion.
Do you have a chance to study how Russian artists approach this topic, given that you said that the important conjunction here is that there is a family and then there is a nationhood? And I guess in Russia it will be approached in a very different way, because the whole idea of the nation being subjugated is not present over there. So did you have a chance to look into that?
I would refer you to the article by Sergei Ushakin. He analyzes in one of his articles Mansky Private Chronicles and Leonid Parfanov's Project Namedny. And in this article he states that they do not, these films and this project, they do not produce the common narrative for the Soviet period, but they are cataloging pieces, images, artifacts, poses, gestures from this time. So the answer should be yes, this kind of film project, they do exist. I do not know absolutely similar, for example, photo films, pure photo films. And then one of the explanations is actually free field for the narrative creation for this kind of archives. But yes, it's different in Russian case.
speaking of pure photo film, if I might have another question, should we call them animation? What do you think?
Yeah, I would call them in a broad sense animation film. As in this, in Narkevicius' case, he uses this technique of, like Ken Burns is palpating, fragmenting the image, and slowly moving just by the surface of the image. In both cases of Giedre Beinoriute and Samulionyte film, they are using just an animation in a strict sense. They are drawing non-existent parts of the picture. They are creating additional objects in the picture.
Which I guess is not significantly different because it's creation of moving images from still images. Other questions from the audience?
I guess it's 7.
Well, it's 2 to 7. I had another question, but I think I'll leave it for later. So, shall we call it a day for the purpose of the lecture? Great.